You are not the problem. Your intelligence is, not because it failed you, but because it works too well. It runs every scenario, calculates every outcome, spots every possible way something could fall apart before it even begins. And slowly, without you ever noticing, it stopped working for you. It started working against you. Think about the last time you wanted something, really wanted it. A conversation you didn't start, a risk you didn't take, a version of your life you keep designing in your head but never actually build. You told yourself you were being smart, you were being safe. There's a specific kind of cowardice that only lives inside high-intelligence people. It doesn't look like fear. It doesn't feel like weakness. It looks like patience, like strategy, like waiting for the right moment. The right moment never comes. Let me show you what that looks like in real life. It's 11:47 p.m. You're staring at your phone. The message is written, not dramatic, not desperate, just honest. You read it again. You adjust one sentence. You remove a word that sounds too eager. You replace it with something more neutral. You imagine how it might land. You hear the tone in their reply. You feel the slight shift in their energy. You see the possibility of awkwardness, of rejection, of silence, and suddenly it doesn't feel worth it. You tell yourself you'll send it tomorrow, when you're clearer, when you've thought it through properly. You put the phone down. Tomorrow never comes, because your mind will always find one more reason to wait. You're not weak, but you might be shrinking, and the terrifying part is that the smarter you are, the less you can see it happening. This is what no one tells you about intelligence. It can become the most sophisticated excuse you've ever built. Let's be honest about something first. You process things faster than most people around you. You connect dots others don't even see. You walk into a room and within minutes you've already read the dynamics, identified the tensions, figured out who's performing and who's real. You've done this so many times it doesn't even feel like a skill anymore. It just feels like seeing. That's not arrogance, that's just how your mind works. And it has served you deeply. You've avoided disasters that other people walked straight into. You've made decisions that looked strange at the time and turned out to be exactly right. You've carried the weight of thinking things through, fully, seriously, completely, when everyone else was just reacting and hoping for the best. There's a particular kind of loneliness in that, being the one who sees more, feels more, thinks further ahead than the conversation allows, but also a particular kind of confidence. Because when your mind is your greatest tool, you learn to trust it completely. You learn to live inside it, to let it lead, to follow it even when your instincts say something different. Because your mind has always been more reliable than your instincts, hasn't it? And why wouldn't you trust it? It's precise. It's fast. It filters noise. It protects you from impulsive decisions, from embarrassing mistakes, from the kind of exposure that other, less careful people walk into without blinking. It has earned your loyalty 1,000 times over. You built your identity around it. Your self-respect lives there. The way you see yourself, the way you want others to see you, runs directly through that intelligence. This is important, crucial actually, because what comes next only makes sense if you understand this first. Your intelligence is real. Your edge is real. What it's quietly doing to you is also real. Here's where it starts to get uncomfortable. Your mind doesn't just think, it previews. It runs simulations, fast, detailed, brutally honest simulations of everything that could go wrong before you ever take a single step forward. And because those simulations are so accurate, so vivid, so convincing, you treat them as reality. The message you didn't send. You already heard how it would land, already felt the awkward silence after, already decided it wasn't worth it. The idea you didn't publish. You already saw the criticism, already imagined the indifference, already concluded the timing was off, that you needed more time, more refinement, more certainty before putting it out there. The risk you didn't take. You already lived the failure, already counted the cost, already decided that protecting what you have is smarter than reaching for what you want. And none of that felt like fear. It felt like wisdom. But here's the thing about anticipating pain. When you do it well enough, consistently enough, you don't just avoid the bad outcomes. You avoid everything, because everything real carries risk. Every connection requires vulnerability. Every opportunity demands that you show up before you're ready. Your mind doesn't know the difference between a genuine threat and the discomfort of being seen. It just fires, it just warns, it just protects, and you listen. Every time. There's a sentence worth sitting with. You don't avoid failure. You avoid exposure. That's not strategy. That's the first wall of the prison. And you built it yourself, brick by brick, believing it was architecture. You review everything. The conversation you had 3 days ago, you've already replayed it, adjusted what you said, identified the moment your tone shifted, noted what the other person's expression meant, filed it, analyzed it, reached a conclusion and then questioned the conclusion. You do this automatically, constantly, with surgical precision, and somewhere along the way, you started calling it self-awareness. Growth, emotional intelligence, the mark of someone who takes their own development seriously. But there's a version of self-awareness that doesn't liberate you. It paralyzes you. When you're aware of every micro-expression you make, every word choice, every possible interpretation of your behavior, you stop moving naturally. You start performing, monitoring, editing yourself in real time, before the moment even finishes happening. You rehearse conversations before they start. You debrief them after they end. You live inside a permanent internal courtroom where you are simultaneously the defendant, the prosecutor, and the judge. Nothing ever gets a clean verdict, because your mind is too sophisticated to let anything be simple. You think that level of scrutiny is what separates you from people who act without thinking. And in some ways, you're right. But here's what that scrutiny costs you: the ability to act without first dismantling your own confidence. You never feel ready. Not really. There's always one more thing to reconsider. One more angle you haven't fully explored. One more version of yourself that would handle this better. Speak more clearly. Be more prepared. You call it perfectionism. You call it high standards. You call it maturity. But maturity that never moves isn't maturity. It's a very elegant, very intelligent form of standing still. And the longer you stand there, refining, revising, waiting, the more natural it starts to feel, until stillness stops feeling like a choice and starts feeling like who you are. Stop for a second. Not metaphorically. Actually stop, because this question deserves more than a passing thought. It deserves your full, uncomfortable, honest attention. How many opportunities have you already let die because you needed to be 100% certain first? Not almost certain, not reasonably confident, 100%, guaranteed, airtight. Sit with that number for a moment. There was a relationship you didn't pursue, not because the feeling wasn't real. It was real, and you knew it, but because you couldn't control how it would end. So you stayed inside the analysis, kept observing, kept waiting for a signal so clear it couldn't be misread. And while you waited, the moment passed. The person moved on, and you told yourself it probably wouldn't have worked anyway. There was a career move you didn't make. The opportunity was real. The timing was imperfect. Timing is always imperfect, but you needed more preparation, more clarity, more proof that you were ready, and more never arrived. So neither did you. There was a city you didn't move to, a project you didn't launch, a conversation that would have changed everything, and you knew it would have changed everything, but you couldn't guarantee it would change things well. So you stayed where the outcome was already known. Safe, controlled, smaller. This is the part that nobody warns you about. Intelligence doesn't just help you evaluate risk. It helps you justify avoidance so convincingly that you never have to admit that's what you're doing. You didn't freeze. You deliberated. You didn't retreat. You assessed. You didn't give up. You decided it wasn't the right moment. And every single one of those decisions made perfect sense. That's what makes this so devastating. The life you didn't live was never taken from you. You reasoned your way out of it. This is the part that will bother you most. Not because it's harsh, but because the moment you hear it, some quiet part of you will already know it's true. Cowardice has a new face, and it looks nothing like what you were taught to recognize. It doesn't tremble. It doesn't run. It doesn't make excuses that embarrass itself. The cowardice that lives inside intelligent people is clean, articulate, and extraordinarily well-dressed. It shows up to every conversation with data. It speaks in measured tones. It never raises its voice because it never needs to. It just reasons you out of the room. Modern cowardice doesn't look like weakness. It looks like control. It looks like someone who has their priorities straight, who doesn't make impulsive decisions, who understands that patience is a virtue and that not every opportunity is worth the risk. It looks, in other words, exactly like you. And that's the mechanism no one sees, including you. Because when fear wears the costume of intelligence, it becomes invisible, not just to others, to yourself. You can't identify it as fear because it never feels like fear. It feels like clarity, like discernment, like the reasonable conclusion of a thorough thought process. You don't look afraid, you look intelligent. And that one distinction has cost you more than you've ever allowed yourself to calculate, because fear that looks like wisdom doesn't get challenged. It gets respected, it gets defended, it gets passed off as a personality trait. I'm just someone who thinks before I act, and quietly hardens into a permanent way of being. You stopped questioning it a long time ago, not because the fear disappeared, because it learned to speak in your voice, and once fear learns your voice, you stop being able to tell you apart. There's a version of you that never got built, not because you failed, not because the world blocked you, but because you kept adjusting the blueprint, trimming ambitions that felt too exposed, softening edges that felt too risky, quietly negotiating with yourself until the design felt safe enough to actually live inside. And you did it so gradually, so intelligently, that you never noticed the original version disappearing. Think about what you wanted at 22, the audacity of it, the size, the complete indifference to whether it was realistic or not. You had a version of your future that was almost embarrassingly bold, and somewhere between then and now, you domesticated it. You called it growing up. You called it getting realistic. You called it understanding how the world actually works. But here's the question that deserves an answer you can't rehearse. If no one had ever challenged you, if life had just let you keep shrinking quietly, how small would you have become? Because shrinking doesn't announce itself. It arrives as accommodation, as adjustment, as the reasonable decision to want less, risk less, need less. And each reduction feels justified in the moment, logical even, until one day you look at the life you're living and realize it fits perfectly. Not because it's everything you wanted, because you resized yourself to fit it. That's the existential cost no one puts a number on, not the opportunities missed. Those are painful, but countable. The real cost is the version of you that required those opportunities to exist. The person who would have been forged by taking those risks, surviving those failures, living at the actual edge of their capacity. That person didn't get to exist, not because fate intervened, because your intelligence made shrinking feel reasonable. And reasonable is the most dangerous word in your vocabulary. You've had courage wrong this entire time. Not completely, but enough to matter. Because somewhere in your mental architecture, courage got filed next to impulsivity, next to recklessness, next to the kind of person who leaps without looking, who acts on emotion, ignores consequence, burns everything down for the thrill of the fire. And since you're not that person, since you never were, you quietly exempted yourself from the conversation. Courage wasn't yours to claim. It belonged to people who didn't think as much. But that's not what courage is. Courage is not the absence of foresight. It's not acting without understanding the risk. It's not silencing your mind or pretending the danger isn't real. Your intelligence was never the obstacle. The way you've been using it, that's the obstacle. Real courage is a specific skill, and it has nothing to do with being fearless. It's the ability to tolerate discomfort without letting it make your decisions. That's it. That's the whole thing. It means you can see the risk clearly, with all your analytical precision, with every worst-case scenario fully mapped, and still move, not because you've resolved the uncertainty, but because you've decided that what's on the other side matters more than the guaranteed safety of staying still. Intelligence was always meant to serve action, to sharpen it, to make it more precise, more intentional, more powerful. It was never meant to replace it. When your mind becomes a reason to wait instead of a tool to move better, it has stopped serving you. It has started serving its own continuation, its own comfort, its own need to remain in control of outcomes it was never meant to control. Courage isn't what happens when your mind goes quiet. It's what happens when you move forward. While it's still screaming, that distinction will change everything if you let it. Everything up to this point was diagnosis. This is where it becomes a choice, not a concept, not an insight you file away and revisit someday when conditions are better. A choice, made right now with the information you already have, in the life you're actually living. There is a decision you've been avoiding. You don't need to search for it. It's already there, sitting at the edge of your awareness, waiting with the particular patience of something that knows you haven't forgotten it. You've just been finding better and better reasons not to touch it. You know exactly what it is. Maybe it's a conversation that would crack something open. something you've kept sealed because the outcome isn't guaranteed. Maybe it's a project that would expose you completely, that would put the real version of your thinking in front of people who might not receive it well. Maybe it's a life that looks nothing like the one you currently have, and the gap between here and there feels too wide, too uncertain, too impossible to cross intelligently. Your mind has already built a case against it, a thorough one, airtight even. But here's what that case is actually made of. Not logic. Distance. Your intelligence keeping you far enough from the thing that it can never hurt you, and never change you, and never make you into someone you couldn't have predicted. So here's the only exercise that matters now. Name it. The one thing. The decision living in the space between who you are and who you keep almost becoming. And then ask yourself, with complete honesty, with all your intelligence fully present, are you avoiding this because it's genuinely wrong for you? Or because it's terrifying in exactly the way that real things are terrifying? You already know the answer. The only question left is whether you want to keep being intelligent or finally start being courageous. You came into this thinking about intelligence. You're leaving it thinking about your life. That gap between what you're capable of and what you're actually building isn't a mystery anymore. You've seen the mechanism. You've felt it working. And that awareness alone means something has already shifted. But awareness without movement is just a more sophisticated version of standing still. So here's what happens next. Pick one decision, the one that came to mind during Chapter 8, the one you immediately tried to think your way around. You don't need perfect conditions. You don't need more preparation. You need the next 24 hours and the willingness to move before you're ready. Do it before your mind rebuilds the case against it, because it will. That's what it does. That's what it's always done. The difference now is that you can see it happening. If this cracked something open in you, if some part of this felt uncomfortably, specifically true, subscribe, because this channel exists for exactly this kind of mind. The ones who think deeply, see clearly, and are finally ready to stop using their intelligence as a reason to wait. Your next level isn't more knowledge, it's motion.